Dear students, welcome to Commissionerate of Collegiate Education Learning Management System. In this video presentation, I am going to explain you the topic Threats to Biodiversity. This topic is covered under Life Skill course, that is Environmental Education. Myself, Vinni Teja, lecturer in Chemistry, SKR and SKR, Government College for Women, Autonomous Kadapa. The contents that we are going to discuss in this topic are the learning outcomes of threats to biodiversity, and different threats to biodiversity include natural calamities, habitat destruction, overexploitation, introduction of exotic species, pollution, predator and pest control. After this presentation, you will be able to understand the current threats to biodiversity. You can explain the effects of overexploitation, pollution, habitat loss, and hunting on biodiversity. You can realize the role of each species and its importance in sustaining the biodiversity. You can assess how human interactions can affect ecosystem biodiversity. So let us understand the threats to biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of living things. An area with healthy biodiversity will have several varieties of life in it. They include animals, plants, and microorganisms. All these different species link to each other in a network called an ecosystem. Biodiversity is highly significant in balancing of natural process. It provides food, clothing, medicine, and many more. Economists call the economically valuable goods and services provided by the ecosystem as ecological services. These services include water purification, nutrient recycling, crop pollination, stable climate, pollution control, protection from natural calamities, etc. When there is sufficient biodiversity on this planet, these services maintain high sustainability of ecosystem. But ecosystem services are closing down as species go extinct and the ecosystems grow weakened or disturbed. The increased growth of human populations, consumption levels, and mobility are the origin of today's most of the serious threats to biodiversity. At present, there are many threats to biodiversity. Some of them include natural calamities, habitat destruction and habitat fragmentation, overexploitation, introduction to exotic species, pollution, predator and pest control. Let us try to understand these threats to biodiversity in detail. Natural calamities like floods, earthquakes, droughts, wildfires, tsunamis, volcanoes, etc. create a great loss of biodiversity. Due to flooding, large amount of nutrients from soil gets washed away. Drought results in the dryness of soil and declines the levels of water table, which leads to the suffering of animals as well as plants. Similarly, wildfires in extremely dense forests and earthquakes significantly destroys the life of organisms and thus affects the biodiversity. Volcanoes also smash up the life of animals and plants nearby areas. Epidemics as well as pandemics seldom wipe out most of the population in the world. The next threat to biodiversity is habitat destruction and habitat fragmentation. Habitat destruction occurs when a particular area is converted from healthy habitat to unhealthy habitat. The main reasons for habitat loss include deforestation, desertification, filling of wetlands, mining, industrial activities, pollution, soil erosion, depletion of nutrients, logging, harvest of fossil fuels, water extraction, etc. Habitat destruction eventually results in the extinction of species, therefore, loss of biodiversity. Habitat fragmentation refers to the loss of large units of habitat. It is another serious threat to biodiversity due to human developmental activities. Large wild areas are transformed into smaller fragments of land. This breakdown of habitats of animal and plant species detach animal communities and finally reducing the genetic diversity. Another serious threat to biodiversity is overexploitation. It is the massive collection of species from their native habitats. When large number of species exploited more, the entire network of life in that area collapse. Actions like fishing, farming and logging can be done sustainably, but today they are often doing in ways that overexploit a resource. Overexploitation of medicinal plants have eventuated in their loss from native habitats. Many plants such as pitcher plants, Drosera species, Coleotum species, etc. are relentlessly hunted and collected for academic tutoring and laboratory experiments. Hunting and poaching leads to overexploitation of different varieties of life forms. Hunting is the human practice in search of capturing or killing wildlife species. Most common reasons to hunt are to harvest food and valuable animal products like tusks, fur, horn, bones, etc. Hunting may also be done to eliminate the predators dangerous to humans or domestic animals. They can be done for trade or tourism or for ecological conservation against overpopulation of invasive species. Hunting and harvesting of natural resources led to overexploitation of the environment. The species is no longer sustainable if exploitation exceeds its limit. Poaching is the illegal hunting or catching of wild animals. Various plants and animals are illegally collected for commercial utilization of their products such as cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, perfumes, and decoration purposes. For example, the poaching of elephants for their ivory and rhinos for their horns, which are used in traditional medicine, is a major threat to these species. Another threat to biodiversity is introduction of exotic species. An exotic species is a species living outside its native area but which has arrived there by human action directly or accidentally. It is also called as a foreign species, introduced species, or non-native species. The influence of exotic species is highly variable. Some species may have a negative effect on local ecosystem in which they have introduced. In such case, they are also classified more significantly as invasive species. Exotic species can cause competition for native species and change the functions of ecosystem. For example, invasive plants can alter nutrient recycling and hydrology in native ecosystems. Many exotic plants and animal introductions probably fail because of the low number of individuals introduced or poor adaptation to the ecosystem they enter. Introduction of exotic species or invasive species into an ecosystem leads to the following changes. They can compete with native species for food, for shelter, etc. They alters the natural ecosystem. They can even disturb the food chain of that ecosystem. Another major threat to biodiversity is pollution. Water pollution, air pollution, soil pollution, in any form, it is the major threat to biodiversity. Vehicles, power plants, and factories are primary sources of air pollution. In some cases, pollutants are directly harmful. In some cases, they cause indirect cost to the ecosystem. Example for the direct damage is lead poisoning, and the indirect damage to the ecosystem include the increased levels of carbon dioxide. In this slide, you can observe the symptoms of lead poisoning. The indirect damage caused by the carbon dioxide is it raises the temperature of the earth. High concentration of carbon dioxide emission leads to the climate change called global warming. Heavy metals, pesticides, plastics, fertilizers, and herbicides are some of the water pollutants. Heavy metals like mercury, lead, arsenic, zinc can leach into the soil and water from mines. The accumulation of heavy metals into the food chain is called bioaccumulation. Nutrients from fertilizer like nitrogen and phosphorus promote plant growth, but when their concentration levels increased in water system, they destroy the aquatic life. Greater accumulation of nitrates and phosphates in healthy water bodies can result in algal blooms. This phenomenon is called eutrophication, which depletes the oxygen needed by aquatic animals in water bodies. The next threat to biodiversity is predators, which controls the pests. Predators are the biological control agents that lives by capturing and feeding on another species. They are usually larger and more powerful than their prey. Most common predators attack variety of pest species and helps in their control. Some of the predators include ladybird beetles, which controls scale insects, aphids, etc., and flower flies, which controls the scale insects. Nematodes control soil-borne fungi, and spiders control leaf hoppers, etc. Biological control agents of weeds include seed predators and plant pathogens. Predators also threatens biodiversity. Through predation, parasitism, competition, or other attacks on non-target species, they can damage the ecosystem. An introduced biological control does not always aim pest species. It can target the native species also. Hence, preservation of biodiversity from these threats for our future generations is our responsibility. These are some web references you can access to get additional information on threats to biodiversity. You can also scan the QR codes that I have given here to watch the animated videos on impact of biodiversity loss on environment and also the pest control. I hope you have understood this topic very well. And my sincere thanks to APCCE for giving me this great opportunity. Thank you all.